Meeting to order. Good morning. Kind of quiet in here. Let's keep it that way, right? It'd be nice. Let's start out with introductions. My name is Byron Chapman. I'm chair of the meeting. Correct.
Tom Hall, KYTC District 5 Planning.
Greg Rawlings, Federal Highways.
Bernie Bowling, St. Matthews.
Matt Minier, City of Jeffersontown.
Sherry Connor, City of Chaplin.
John Callahan with Louisville Metro.
Justin Tackett, Floyd County.
Jim Udi, NDOT.
Larry Cheney, Kipta.
Ashley Tenius, Kipta. Sarah Berry, Kipta. Amanda Dethridge with Kipta.
I'm Mary Lou Halber with Kipta.
Nick Bale with Kipta. Andy Rush, Kipta. Tim Robinson, GRW.
Rob Fraser with HDR.
Sean Dyke, HDR. James Robinson with Drama.
Steve Miller, Congressman Greg Gutha. Curtis Hockenberry, City of Shepherdsville.
Scott Fleming, City of Shepherdsville.
Lady Dave Joyce Hill, KYTC.
Shannon Rickett, U of L.
Jim Sears, University of Louisville.
Megan Bennett, AECOM.
Eric Rottenmill, Federal Highway. Thomas Witt, KYTC.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Let's get on to item number 2. It's our minutes for our regular meeting of April 27th. A motion to approve.
So moved.
Have a motion. Have a second.
Second.
Additions or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Item number 3, this is a public comment period. Has the time been allocated for anyone wish to address this board? Does anyone wish to do that at this time? Hearing no one, item number 4 is a public meeting report.
On June 3rd, we attended the Global Lou Festival for the Americana Center, and that's all we have for this meeting.
All right, any questions? Item number 5, downtown mobility plan. Larry Cheney.
Yes, sir. A couple of years ago, we embarked on this effort to develop a study that would bring together a lot of the different plans that have been in the works for downtown Louisville, including Move Louisville, which is the most recent one, some of the downtown partnerships plans, TARC facilities, bike plans, all the different things that are happening that are sometimes seemingly happening independent of one another. We tried to pull all those together in one study to try to make sense of them, to see which ones would work together and which ones wouldn't work. So we employed HDR as a consultant to put that study together. This study was 80% of PL planning funds, 20% was matched by the downtown partnership. And Mr. Rob Fraser from HDR is here. He'd like to go through where we are today, the status of the study. We are in a draft format at this point, taking comments from all the partners and getting ready to put the final document together. Rob?
Thank you. All right, so I am going to go through this fairly quickly, but certainly if there are questions, I would love to answer as we go. The downtown mobility study is looking at a variety of modes and various things. This is a quick agenda. We're going to spend most of our time, though, on items 3, 4, and 5, and those are the modes that we looked at. But I do want to give some introductory context. So the study area, Larry mentioned downtown, but it extends into kind of the edges of the neighborhoods surrounding downtown and the medical district. And the purpose of the project is really to develop this multimodal plan that's looking at mobility and safety for all users in the core area, looking at economic development and livability. So that is the goal. Again, all users is everyone, and it's looking at kind of enhancing the complete streets concept downtown. So these are some key points, though, that I want to make before I move on, and that is that this is a technical planning analysis. It's comprehensive. It also is based on a lot of data. I'll just show a few things here in a moment about that. Coordinates projects across all modes. Larry mentioned that coordination is very important, but it's not an approved local plan. And it, as it says here, it does not set local policies, does not set their priorities, but it's to give a technical undergirding for moving projects forward and for agencies to use in their decision making and implementation. So the long list of studies, there's a much longer list actually of studies that were reviewed and were a part of this project, but this gives you just a quick sample. And Move Louisville is on there, as well as many others. We drew projects from all those different prior studies. And then we did our own technical analysis. So on the upper right, you see TARP's transit map, and we looked at a lot of transit data. Lower right is from Louisville Metro's, their synchro model for downtown. We looked at traffic volumes and operations. And then we looked at 12 different evaluation criteria for all these projects, and there's well over 100 different projects. We had 12 different evaluation criteria that we looked at, so safety, transit, mobility, but also urban form, and then freight mobility, a pretty wide range of things that we considered when we evaluated these projects. All right, so that's kind of the context. Let's go ahead and start about the first mode of pedestrians and talk about issues first. And I'll do this for each of these. The issues for pedestrians, primarily safety and then connectivity. In the upper right, you see a map of kind of the hotspot locations of crashes for pedestrians downtown. In the lower right, you see some key locations where there's a desire, and has been in many of the plans, for better connectivity to the riverfront. So we identified some issues, and then we pulled from all those prior studies and from new work and discussions, and came up with various projects. So these are pedestrian projects that were considered for downtown, and they're kind of grouped in bins here. So we have sidewalk projects, we have intersection projects, connectivity projects, and then kind of these corridor area projects. And then we took each of those projects and we looked at it in the context of the whole system. And so you'll see that a number of them kind of flip to yellow. And those yellow projects are actually street projects. So I talked before about complete streets serving pedestrians, bicycles, transit, auto, truck, make sure everyone is getting where they need to go. And we want to roll these pedestrian projects into other larger projects where that makes sense. And so that was an important part of this study, and it happened throughout. So I'll just focus on one. Right in the middle, there's something called, it says P4 right in the middle, that circle, and then it goes to S40, that's the end of the Brook Street ramp. There's a missing sidewalk and crosswalk there, and there's actually an active project to address that and to make some safety improvements and other improvements, and so that project got rolled in to that street project. And then I mentioned riverfront access. If you look up in the upper left, there's a P11, one of those ovals there right by the river, and it actually disappears. Well, it doesn't really disappear, it becomes part of the River Road Extension project. And so we kind of roll things in, we want to look at them together. And then there are a few projects that were standalone pedestrian projects. They didn't really fit into any of the other projects, and those we came up with cost estimates. We evaluated them, we rated them, we put them into phasing bins, potential phasing bins. Again, this is to give information on these projects. And so number 2 there is spot safety, the top 7 locations. And so that got rated fairly highly. We put a cost to it, and we define that. And we define it in what I'm going to call kind of an encyclopedia of projects. So this is the Riverfront Access project that I mentioned. And this project is written up. And then it actually refers to the River Road Extension project and says this would be good to incorporate into that project. And there's actually cross references. This report is right now about 160 pages. It might, we'll see exactly where it ends up, but it's pretty long and inclusive, and it's this kind of encyclopedia that you get cross references between projects that we think are important, but they need to be grouped with other projects. All right, so then we go on to bicycles. This issues, again, safety and then connectivity through downtown for bicycles. And so we looked at every single street for bicycles to see where does it make sense to put additional bicycle facilities. And we came up with a fairly big number of facilities, and we looked at what's already there, what could be there, and then we did the same thing I mentioned before. We said, well, where do those need to be grouped with other projects? Where do we need to look at things more comprehensively? And so a bicycle project really needs to not be done separately, but in context with whatever's going on in the street. So you see a number of them that are grouped into street projects. There were a few that remained bicycle-only projects, and those are the orange and green lines that you see. And then those got costs associated with them. They got rated, put into phases. So these bicycle-only projects, how do they kind of stack up against each other? And so I'll draw your attention to the second line. It's 11th Street, and that goes right through the new Choice neighborhood development just west of 9th Street. And so that's a project that kind of could be a standalone, but we mentioned that it needs to be done with the ongoing development there. And then a little further down, you'll see Floyd Street show up, Witherspoon to Market. And so that's at the north end of Floyd Street, right where it approaches the park. And if we, one of the concepts that we have there is that you could actually do what the city's doing, neighborways for bicycle facilities, and you could actually upgrade that a little bit more to a full bicycle boulevard. It's about 2 blocks, and it's a low volume section of Floyd Street. So we have put that idea out there and explain it and give a little background for it, again, in this kind of listing of bicycle projects. All right, then transit projects. I'm going to quickly, we did quite a bit of analysis, and I don't have time to go into all of this, but we show the transit coverage, where service is most intense. We did ridership overlaid on top of employment, and we looked at how frequently people transfer by different lines. And so you can see the dark shading off on the right is people that always transfer for those different lines. And there's a lot of transfer activity that occurs on Parks routes, and a lot of it occurs downtown. And then what do people want at the stops down, throughout the system? And faster, more direct routing, shelters, benches at stops were high priority for those people that are frequent riders and recent riders of the system. So we looked at all those different factors and many others and came up with a list of transit projects. So this map shows the range of transit projects, and they range from bus-only lanes to new enhanced service to routing revisions and the transit transfer zone. So there are a number of ideas. They don't all move forward, but there are a number of ideas for consideration in the downtown. And if you look at the 4 circles, those actually stay as transit projects and are near term, and those are transfer locations where people, we want to emphasize the ability to make transfers and maybe upgrade stops in those locations. And that just gives you one example of a transit project. The transit-only projects were, again, rated. They were provided with costs, and so I'll talk about a couple of them here, just to give you a sampling of what's in this encyclopedia of projects. The transit emphasis zones is what I'm talking about for transfers, and having transfers at different stop locations that are key in downtown. And then, I'll just go ahead actually to the next 3 slides. So this is a route slide. We looked at rerouting a variety of buses to kind of create transit emphasis corridors, and that's something that has been discussed in prior work, and we came up with some concepts that TARC could consider for doing some of that. And it emphasizes Main Market, Muhammad Ali, Chestnut, and Broadway. And then this is the transfer locations I was talking about. And these are some of the highest volume bus stops in downtown where people can easily make transfers, and where riders, when I'm catching the bus, I actually go to one of these stops, and there's a good place to try to upgrade stops and look at what we're doing in these locations in light of the other needs at those intersections. So that kind of gives you a quick summary of the first 3. Now we get to the streets. The streets actually include a number of the other project elements because of this kind of complete streets view, looking at all nodes on streets. This is the map of all the different street projects that were considered downtown. It includes one-way to two-way conversions, which have been discussed in many prior projects, lane reductions, complete streets enhancements, connectivity projects, intersection improvements, kind of the dots, and then some other area improvements, which are, for example, adjusting the speed limit throughout downtown on all streets, things like that. So that gives you a sense of the scale of street projects, and then we evaluated those projects and put them into phases. And so I'll linger here just for a minute to say some of the near-term projects are the things you see in the beige. Those are things that are nearer term, and they include changes on Jefferson, 7th and 8th, Broadway, and then up at Story in Maine. So there's a select number of projects that end up being nearer term projects. I'll talk about a couple of them here. So when we went ahead and put costs to all of those street projects and ranked them, and I mentioned the cross-reference again in kind of this idea, this has got a lot of information in it. We want to make sure it's useful to people. We actually put cross-references for which other projects are related to each other. And that's embedded into the document. And there's a lot of street projects. Like I said, over 100 different projects got considered. So here are two projects that are in the kind of nearer term as projects for consideration. Jefferson Street, and it's a two-way conversion on Jefferson Street, and a two-way conversion of a short piece of kind of where Baxter Chestnut, it's kind of south of the main story intersection, and adjusting the main story intersection, things that Louisville Metro has been talking about. The idea being that these changes together could allow for a better, for a dispersion of traffic in the New Lou area, allow people to actually come from Maine all the way down and get onto Jefferson more easily. So there's some benefits to doing that, along with the Market Street project that's currently underway. So that's one example. Another project that is discussed in this report is the possibility of changing Jefferson Street and possibly putting a bike lane and a bus-only lane on Jefferson Street, and what are the implications of that, and how might that look, and how would that work, and in this case there's some parking that is removed, so how does that work? So that project is discussed, and then the River Road extension is the last project that I'll talk about, and that is the extension of River Road further to the west. And you just see I threw a couple prior study concepts. Those are things that this project's been looked at before. It's now in design, and it's an important project, and so that is kind of written up. But more than just that being an independent street project, there are things, and I mentioned a few of them, that would need to tie into that project, and so it kind of gives the agencies involved the ability to again look at that cross-reference and see, are there other things we need to be thinking about as we do this project? Some smaller projects that should be tied in. So that is a very fast summary, and I feel like I should have stopped in the middle to ask for questions, but I was trying to keep to my time. So are there any questions? Did I stay on time?
Questions?
How are you going to distribute the study? How do you envision it being used by the different agencies?
Well, we hope they use it as a reference. We can't guarantee that because, as he said early on, it's not a policy document. It's just a guide, an effort to try to put all these plans together and make sense of some of them. Mm-hmm. It is we wanted to call it a plan rather than a study because it gives you a direction. It lets you say, okay, if I'm going to improve 9th Street, I need to consider this and this and this. We will distribute, it will be on our website, obviously. All the partners, everyone who's been involved with it will get copies of it, and it'll be available to the policy committee, certainly.
I think it'll be very useful.
We hope so.
I definitely hope so.
There are other ways to have done this that would have taken a lot less time and a lot less effort, but we wanted to get down into the weeds of all these projects and see what the impacts they would what impacts they would have on one another, and are they practical to pursue?
Other questions? We've been asked to, as a group, to accept this draft study. If we accept the draft study, then it will be on the website.
We'll move on to the final document.
Okay, this is not on the website at this point.
No, it is not.
Okay.
Once we get the comments from all the partners to the study, then we'll issue the final document that will be posted on the website and distributed.
Okay. So we're asked to accept this draft study. Have a motion and second.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Thank you so much. Item number 6, transportation alternatives. Nick?
Yes.
You're up.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here today to present the funding recommendations for the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Funding Program. sorry, I think, end of slideshow. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, so just for a little background, the Transportation Alternatives Program has been called many things. This is a similar program to what people would refer to as the TAP program project, or the TAP program. It basically provides federal funding for projects that are geared towards pedestrians and bicyclists. That can also include transit projects, pathway lightings, sidewalks, and bike lanes, of course. So why I'm here is we're at the tail end of basically a notice for funding availability. Back in February, the TPC, you all approved minor changes to the application and the selection criteria. On March 3rd, we sent out an announcement to everybody in the region about this availability of funds with application materials and whatnot provided. April 14th, applications were due from the local public agencies. And then at that point, the working group, 5-person working group, reviewed all those applications and scored them. We took an average and then ranked those projects to come up with the working group's recommendations. Last week at the TTCC, they took action to approve the working group's recommendations and bring them to you all for final consideration. So, on the Indiana side of things, we received 2 projects. The Jefferson-Clarksville project was a joint effort on 9th Street and Montgomery. The plan is basically to design and construct a multimodal connection between those 2 districts, the ARCH districts, including sidewalks, a bicycle path, lighting, and other amenities. The other project that was submitted was from TARC. The project would basically add a shelter, concrete boarding area, trash, and other amenities in front of the Jefferson High School bus stop, and then across the street there would be similar amenities provided. Ultimately, after reviewing both projects, the working group determined that the Jefferson-Clarksville project ranked higher, and as a result, both the working group and TTC recommends fully funding the PE phase in 2019 and the construction phase in 2020. So that's it for Indiana. There's not a ton of funds to go around, so we're funding the sole project. If you all approve that recommendation, there would be no transportation alternatives funds available until 2021. So just a heads up for everybody else. On the Kentucky side of things, it was a little more competitive. We received 6 projects. Requested funds were about $1 million more than we had available, so it was pretty competitive. And again, the working group reviewed all of these and ranked them. The highest ranked project was TARC's Park Place Mall Transit Node. Here, the idea is to construct a pedestrian plaza, including shelter, bicycle storage and lockers, solar lighting and landscaping along that Dixie Highway corridor that is being renovated along with the BRT and other projects at this time and in the future. So that project was recommended for fully funding by both the working group and the TTCC for construction in 2018. The second highest ranked project was J-Town's Patty Lane Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Improvement Project. They requested about $560,000 for construction in 2018. The project would construct safety and access management improvements, including sidewalks on both sides, sharrows and drainage improvements, as long as reconfiguring the curb cuts there, which goes along with the access management portion of that project. Again, the recommendation is to fully fund that in 2018. Moving along, the third ranked project, Louisville Metro's McNeely Lake Shared Use Path. This is part of the Louisville Loop. It was basically going to be a new construction that connects the recent construction for a bicycle multi-use path at Cedar Creek Road to the west side of the McNeely Lake Dam. So it's kind of filling in a connection there and helping us move the Louisville Loop along. That project requested $2 million in funds, and the reason why that is being recommended for funding in 2020 is our annual allocation is only a little over $1 million, so we had to wait a couple years in order to build up enough funds for us to be able to fully pay for that project's construction phase. The fourth project is Louisville Metro's River Road multimodal improvements, which were just mentioned in the last presentation. The idea here is to reallocate the northernmost River Road lane, traveling in the westbound direction, relocate the barrier wall, and add some street lighting. We did not have, after fully funding those first three projects, there wasn't enough funding to fully fund this one. But what the working group in TTC is recommending is the design and utilities being fully funded in 18 with partial funding for its construction phase in 2019. I think their request was about $600,000 for construction, so there's 160, 170 short. That will have to be make up the difference somehow. The two projects towards the end, Mount Washington's Historic Memorial Use Trail project. This is one part of a larger project. And then Louisville Metro also submitted a project for the 3rd Street lighting along that corridor. So these are the TTC recommendations on the Kentucky side. Again, with these recommendations, there wouldn't be any funding available until 2021. And at this time, I can take any questions you may have, but I'll be asking you all to consider these recommendations and make formal approval to award federal funds to this process, and then add those to the tip and whatnot. Yes?
When you fund a project for construction, does that mean the LPA picks up the design costs to get ready for construction?
That's right. We are not, as part of this program, we are not funding those phases. So they have either already been completed with local funds, or in some cases there may have been a project or two that had federal funds, like the McNeely Lake project had federal funds, I think, for design and whatnot.
Just state funds.
State funds, sorry. Thank you, John.
But those projects will proceed sufficiently through design to be ready for construction in 2018 with the TAP funds.
That's our understanding based on the applications that were submitted and the timelines that were included.
We've tried to go back and verify everyone's schedule, first of all with the application, and then going back and looking at how we were going to set up the money, if that would still work for their schedules.
Right.
Good.
So the design and everything is real numbers to be ready for.
That's right.
Other questions? We are asked to approve this breakdown of the suggestions, both for Indiana and Kentucky. Do I need a motion as such?
I'd like to take Indiana and Kentucky separately if we could.
Let's go with Indiana first, of the ranking project number 1. Motion to approve that one for construction. Motion of second? Second. Motion second. Comments? All in favor on Indiana project? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Doing the same thing for Kentucky. The first 4 projects are the ones we recommended, that the committee recommended, and we're asking for that as well. Motion?
Move.
Motion. Have a motion and a second. Questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Those motions are carried. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Item number 7, Intellect Transportation System. Andy? Afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right, today I'm going to talk about our new regional ITS architecture. Anybody at the table not get one of these, first of all? Grab one. Actually, we make sure Americana gets one. Yeah. So for those of you that were at TTCC, this is going to be a familiar presentation. All right. First of all, what is or what are ITS? ITS stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems. And these are projects and systems that use electronic technologies and communications to improve the safety and efficiency of surface transportation. The most visible, probably the one we're all most familiar with, are some of these Trimark signs, the dynamic message signs that we see out on our freeways, more and more seemingly each year. It's much more than that, but that's the idea, and hopefully this presentation will inform you a little bit further. So that's what ITS are. What is a regional ITS architecture? This is a roadmap for transportation systems integration in the region for the next 20 years is what it's defined as. And in some sense, it's a long-range plan for an ITS, but it's more than a list of projects. Okay, I want to make that perfectly clear here, that this is not the long-range plan for ITS projects, but it's along the same vein. And again, I'll let you know more about that here shortly. we have an ITS architecture, and our ITS architecture is just very old. It was actually one of the first ITS architectures, as I understand it, and it was developed 13 years ago in 2004. And so with things like ITS and technology innovations, these things, they get some age on them pretty fast. And so we're past due for one, trust me. And one other thing that it does, and I don't want to underestimate the impact of this, is this new ITS architecture keeps us legal. It allows for continued investment into ITS projects by the stakeholders in the region. So how did we update it? Well, here's a bit of the schedule. So it was a process that started last year. The consultant that helped us out on this, their name is Consistec. Consistec, they're the pros in this. They've done dozens of these regional architectures. So they taught us a lot. I know they taught me a lot, and I think they taught some of you all a lot at the workshops and other communications that went on throughout. One of the things that was critical to the process was the consultation with all the stakeholders. So Consistec and KIPTA staff, and then many of your all's agencies had several chances to consult with them, but they really took the time to get to know and get to meet with TARC and Louisville Metro, NDOT, KYTC, Trimark, to understand what's currently out there, what assets are deployed right now, and then also what these agencies and others have planned for the next 10, 15, we say 20 years. And another thing that was important on that consultation process was the question that was asked. The question that was asked to these agencies was, what do you envision happening? And in this case, we didn't really put the constraint of dollars on it. What would you do if dollars were not necessarily a major issue? That gets to, it's not really the long range plan. The long range plan is financially constrained, but this one isn't necessarily. I don't think that played a major role in the list of projects, but that was something that we wanted them to consider, kind of to think bigger picture. We held a stakeholder workshop in this room back in November. I think many of you all were there. I think that was an extremely informative process, and that kept that consultation going, and it really helped in the development of this report. We just received the report just within the past month or so, and it comes in 3 sizes, if you will. The first, we've got an executive summary, we've got a final report, and then we've got a project website, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these. So the executive summary is what you had in the table, and it's what I passed around the room too, with the blue top on it. The executive summary is, to be completely honest, it's probably all most people need to know about a regional ITS architecture. There's nothing here to fill most of our brains on ITS architecture. If you can get familiar with this, you probably know enough. There's only probably a select few people that are really going to dig into the weeds much further than this. So that was good to have, and I encourage you to perhaps use this as a resource at some point. What we also have is a final report, and so this I've got a few of these. If somebody really wants one of these, and this will be on our website. It is on our website now. We'll put it in its more permanent home shortly, perhaps after you all approve it today. This is the final report. This really gets deep in the weeds and has all the details that you didn't know that you wanted to know about ITS architectures, and basically this replaces what we had. The old ITS architecture looks mostly like this. If you go to our website, you would find our old one. It's just a couple 100-page document that looks something similar to this. And third, and this is the best one, or at least my favorite, and I think you all will find it the most useful, we have a project website. And the project website has everything in here and everything in here, and it's a lot easier to use, and it has a lot more than that are in these documents as well. So I would strongly encourage you all to check out the project website. This is the best part of our ITS architecture, I think, right here. You can it's really easy to navigate. You can look at your agency and look at all the projects and the systems and how those interrelate with other agencies, with other projects. If you use anything, use the website. If you're interested in ITS architecture, that's the place to turn to, right there. And this link will be on our website soon. So, in our ITS architecture, this is what it's basically made up of. It's made up of, I'm not going to read all these, but it's made up of all these different things here, some of which I'll go into further here momentarily. But these are the requirements of an ITS architecture, and our new one certainly has all of these things here. Just to summarize a few of them, one of the key things is the identification of stakeholders. And for the ITS architecture, there are several that are, I would call, key or major stakeholders, and those are listed here. And these are the agencies that are most likely to implement ITS projects. But there's far more stakeholders than just those 5 right there, including all the local governments, all the small cities, even to go as far as like the law enforcement and emergency services side, dispatch, fire, EMS. These types of partners or stakeholders were a part of it in a way that's a little bit different than what most people in this room, what you all represent in their relation to ITS architecture. Actually, right there, Vince, that looks like it's a picture from Vince's office. I think Vince looks about like that every day, don't you? For those that don't know, this is the Trimark Traffic Management Center. Brand new, state-of-the-art facility. I would encourage you to, if you ever get a chance, to go check it out. The walls, the screens back here, correct me if I'm wrong, Vince, but all of these monitors back here are strictly ways to monitor the status of the new Easton Tunnel, correct?
And the approaches too.
And approaches. And then along this wall, which goes a little bit, short left of the screen, or left of the photo there, that does effectively what the old Traffic Management Center did, but it does a lot more screens, a lot more information, and the technicians this is where they can change the signs. The sign that I showed on the first one, they can do among many other things, right?
Yeah.
So if you ever get a chance, do check that place out. Something this region would be, I think, very proud of. So the ITS architecture, kind of the guts of it are these things called service packages. And service packages describe how the communications, the ITS communications will work. It shows how data is transferred. It shows how data is disseminated to the public and other users. And so here's an example of a service package, of which there are probably 50 to 100 service packages in our architecture. This one happens to be the Trimark Traffic Management Center there. And this is particular to, you see at the top, traffic information dissemination. So this is a diagram that shows how traffic information is disseminated by Trimark, okay? And this is simply how Trimark would disseminate it. So to try to describe this briefly, and I'm sorry for the fine print, a lot of roadway data, this piece component right here, here's Trimark Traffic Management Center in the middle. Roadway data comes in and out of the Traffic Management Center, and the data comes, it goes out all different ways. So Trimark sends it out back to the roadway system. Trimark sends their data out to private traffic information systems, the Trimark website, in other words. Send it to the media, so the media is a part of it here. And also to emergency management, so metro saves, dispatch operations. So what we also have so we've got these things called existing flows, and you may be able to notice here, those are the solid lines. And we also got these dash lines, and dash lines are the ones you'll see up in the top left, representing those information flows that don't exist quite yet, that are planned or should be ready to go within the next several years. So in this case, Trimark Traffic Management Center, Trimark will be able to provide that data, that roadway network conditions to TARC, to the Route Dispatch Center in the future, but not quite yet. So I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of different stakeholders. We have, in these service packages, we find that a lot of times we have the same service package, traffic information dissemination you see at the top, but it's in different styles and formats. So that last one was how Trimark disseminates information. This is the same service package, but it represents how NDOT disseminates their information. And similarly, there's one for Louisville Metro, and there's one for, I believe it's for like the other local agencies. Okay, so this is the same service package in a different way. So in this case, you see a lot of the same colors representing. You see the media down here in the center instead of Traffic Management Center, Trimark. You see NDOT Mormon TMC plus NDOT TMC. So that represents the place in Indianapolis, and I think the Borman TMC is up in northwest Indiana, I think in the Chicago area, and they can monitor traffic in our region from those places. So it's very similar to TriMark's operation downtown. So again, I just want to emphasize that same types of things happen on different formats by different agencies. Okay, so in our architecture, we have a project implementation plan. So that's effectively a list of projects that looks similar to a TIP or long-range plan, I guess in some ways. But they're categorized short and long-term, but the most important part of that is kind of the generic ones and the specific ones. And what I mean by that is that you'll find a lot of generic projects that aren't fully developed yet. So, for instance, connected vehicles. You know, connected vehicles are not, they're on the market now, but we don't have infrastructure in place in our region right now. So we have something in there that represents a connected vehicle application. So we don't know exactly where connected vehicle applications will be, but they are part of our ITS architecture. Similarly, we have TriMark expansion. We have TriMark expansion generally, and you also find as a project in there, you'll see some things like TriMark expansion on I-265. So that gets to the specific and the general. We've got several TARC improvements in there, both the general and the specific. So there's a list. I don't remember how many projects there were. There's a list of, there's a good list of them on kind of the inside right of the executive summary. Kind of hits the highlights. Now, how do we use this? I mean, for most of you and most of us, anyways, we'll use that website and check out how our agency is affiliated with these projects, how we want to implement projects. We might use it in a few different ways. But this is truly going to supplement our MPO planning process. This will help feed our long-range plan in the future. And it also assists in ITS project definition. And this is I think it's called a V diagram. And for a big ticket item ITS or high technology project, systems engineering analysis is required. And this is kind of the flow chart of how those are supposed to work. Now, my understanding that the new ITS architecture covers us maybe, I think I was told, maybe 3/4 of that analysis. Our ITS architecture covers you all as project sponsors most of the way there, only leaving a bit more for you all to do. I think the last thing in here is a maintenance plan. So our last one, we didn't really have this in, or our current ITS architecture. How are we going to maintain it? When are we going to change it? When are we going to amend it? How do we amend it? Consistech, our consultants, they came up with some good ideas. And I'm not going to get into all of these right now, but effectively we envision working group perhaps, and instead of going 13 years between our next update, we will have minor updates perhaps on an annual basis or so via a TTC working group with TTCC, I think is what is recommended. That's all I have. There's a lot more to it, and I do encourage you, again, to check out the website, explore, especially for your agencies. Check it out what's there. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I'll try to.
Questions?
Well, one of the things he said early on that it kept us legal. Well, it keeps all of you sort of in line with the laws as well. The whole idea behind this initially, back in the early 90s, was to make sure that all the technologies are compatible and that we have communication across agencies and across the country. So one of the things that you'll see ATM on some of those things up at the top, that ATM and a number, those are all going back to those specifications and those criteria and the channels that you need to be on and things like that make sure that all of this nationally is compatible as it develops over time.
Yeah, in fact, this one, ATM S06, this is a very standard one. And effectively, there's a template for all of these. Just like the one from TriMark and NDOT look very similar, there's a template in the national ITS architecture that looks just like this, that just doesn't have the specific names that are local to us here in our region.
And those large projects, if you undertake the larger projects, those requirements, you have to fill out basically the forms to allow you to do those projects and to make sure that the compatibility is there. So this document and this architecture that we have will help you do that. It will help you get to those requirements and fulfill them in your projects.
Is this part of like one of these documents, the New Dixie Highway, use that for instance, is that been incorporated in with the changes to Dixie Highway, or how's it funded? Your project?
How is the Dixie Highway project funded?
The projects for you guys funded?
The architecture or the
Yes,
projects in
architecture.
there? The architecture was funded, Larry, you want to speak to that?
Well, what, the projects that are in there
Right.
are funded from a variety of sources.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, this is a wish list because it's not fiscally constrained and we're looking out 20 years, but actually we're looking out beyond that with the connected vehicles, for instance. But this doesn't assign funding to anything. This just tells you that if you embark on this particular type of project, this is the way you should be doing it.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and you can get real deep in the weeds real quick on the one that I mentioned, kind of what makes up an these things like functional requirements, the standards. The standards are how specifically radio communications and other data communications go. They're national standards and that they need to follow and that are identified here. Certain agreements are in there too. So you can get real deep in the weeds real quick. And again, for most of us, that's this is the level that we need to be on.
Well, have been asked to approve this architectural report. Got a motion such?
So moved.
Second? Any questions from anyone? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Thank you.
And I do have copies of this if anybody wants it up here. So come see me after the meeting if you really, really want one.
Shift project selection, all right?
Well, speaking to that, you'll be able to go on our website, actually put your agency's name in there or the type of project and sort through all these. There are many, many ways to sort it. And once you get in there, you can find all sorts of different things by spending a little time with it. It's very easy to use. On the shift project selection, this is the KYTC process that they are using to develop their new 6-year highway plan. We've talked about that on several occasions, and this body has approved our methodology in examining those projects from our perspective. We've made our project selection. The district has made their selection. The next step is for the administration and the transportation cabinet to select from the projects that were on the list that are on the national highway system. And there will be a certain number of those projects taken from a statewide look at the priorities that they've determined. Once that's done, if any of the projects that were on our list are remaining, I'm being optimistic because you're going to take all of them, right? The projects that are remaining on our list, we're going to have to consider for what they're calling a boost. What that means is that we're endorsing 25% of the remaining projects on that list as projects that are going to move forward. We're going to do that in consultation with the district office, who also has the opportunity to boost the projects by 15 points. So if we get our heads together and we really like one particular project, we can apply all those points to that project and make it more competitive when they go to the next step, the regional level. So what we did, this group approved the process and the forming of a working group. We put together the working group at TTCC. It includes representatives from Bullitt County, KYTC, St. Matthews, Oldham County, J-Town, and Louisville Metro. It's a pretty good cross-section of the TTCC. We wanted to keep it to 5 or 6 people, but that's where we are today. Does anyone here have anything they'd like to add to that? Do you want to add more people to it? Do you want different representation? It's entirely up to you.
Give us those names again.
Bullitt County, KYTC, St. Matthews, Oldham County, the city of Jeffersontown, and Louisville Metro.
And we ask you if you want to add to that list.
If you want to make any changes or you want to add to that list.
Comments?
The next step in the next day or so, maybe today, the 22nd, we'll get that list of projects and we'll put that working group to work.
Put them to work. So we're approving this working group,
Yes, sir.
and
Or whatever change, whatever change you want to make.
What's your thoughts? Do I have a motion to approve this working group? You want to, someone you want to add to it? Get some other reaction going?
I have a question. How does this meld with your putting together the TIP and the long-range plan?
Well, the first thing that we did when we started to look at our sponsorship was to make sure that the projects, in looking at our next long-range plan, we have a project evaluation process. And I'm not sure whether you've seen some of that. We said, okay, we're not going to sponsor any projects that aren't in the current MTP. And then we took those projects and we put them through the new evaluation process. So we've ranked those, including the cabinets projects that they put on their list. So we've got the new evaluation process, ranked all the projects, but we're not going to boost any of those projects unless they were already in the MTP.
So it's a more select group than your TIP.
Yes. It includes TIP projects because many of the projects
But not all of them.
were, no, right, but many of them were not guaranteed funding going forward, so we included some.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is what you're talking about approving right now, is it number 8, or is there something else?
Number 8.
No, it's number 8.
Okay.
The working group, we're looking to approve the working group that's been selected. Bullet, KYTC, St. Matthews, Owen, J County, Metro. Bullet. Have a motion such? Any motion? Have a motion? Second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Hearing none, looks like you got your working group.
If I may make a comment for the working group, obviously the shift process does not include transit projects at all. But while prioritizing projects, if the group could consider the roadways that actually are transit corridors in a long term, just for consideration, because transit is part of the infrastructure, but not directly part of the shift evaluation.
When we evaluated our project, we're looking at it from our perspective. When we evaluated those projects, our new process includes a great deal of transit from the transit perspective.
Correct.
So our rankings have included that based on our process. And we took the cabinets projects and ran them through the same process. So they're all on an equal footing as far as transit is concerned.
When will the start evaluating project ready?
As soon as we get the list from the transportation cabinet, hopefully next week.
Good. Item number 9, transportation TCC bylaws. Larry?
Yes, sir. Once again, this group has approved the addition of new members to the Technical Coordinating Committee, some of whom are here today. Thanks for coming. They include, and we'll go through this again, we've done this before, I know, the City of St. Matthews, who is represented on this committee but was not represented on TPCC. We also brought in the City of St. Matthews, the City of Shepherdsville, and the City of Mount Washington. And the mayors of both Shepherdsville and Mount Washington are with us today. Thank you for attending this meeting. The other addition to the voting membership is the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet's Office of Transportation Delivery. They are not here today, but they have agreed to be a voting member on the TTCC. Advisory members, we have added the Indiana Motor Truck Association and the Kentucky Trucking Association and Trimark. They're now all official advisory members. What we're doing today is a revision to the bylaws, which is the last step in this process. And the only revision, it was in your packet, is to add those people to the list of members in the physical bylaws. We need action to approve that revision.
You understand? It's on agenda 9A, gives the members of that. So I would entertain a motion to approve the ones listed in red, additional members, not only for voting, but also for the advisory.
Make a motion.
Okay, I have a motion, and I have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Now, when will they be meeting together?
What's that?
They're being ready next time.
Yes, they will be attending and they will be voting at the next meeting.
Okay, good deal, thank you. I think it's getting a better variety. Item number 10, fiscal year 2015 to fiscal year 2018.
Thank you. I wanted to inform you today of some administrative modifications to the 2015 to 2018 Transportation Improvement Program. Around the table, there was a memo with a list attached to it. These are considered minor changes to the TIP, and committee action is not needed for these. Just briefly looking at the list, I believe there are 4 pages of projects, but the first project is a J-Town project, and it's a slight change in the description. It's just moving the termini like 1 block, I believe is what that is. The rest of the projects on the list are all KYTC maintenance and, well, they're maintenance projects. They're pavement and pavement rehabilitation and bridge rehabilitation projects. These are projects that KYTC is going to advance using the SDP Urban or SLO funding for the obligation authority to get those projects underway because we had a balance of funds. They were actually, if you can think back a few meetings, I guess a few months ago, this committee agreed to let KYTC essentially borrow that obligation authority so that they could advance some projects now. And then on, I guess, October 1st, they replaced that obligation authority for us so that our projects can then continue on as we had them planned. So basically, these are just showing these projects that are going to be using that funding. There's no action that's needed by the committee, but I'll answer any questions that there might be.
Questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Item number 11, any other business come before the board? Hearing none, motion to adjourn. Jump on this now. Okay, motion and second, all in favor, aye? We are adjourned, thank you so much.